Data out of China there. Well, let's break some of that down for you with Arthur Dong. He's a teaching professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Rachelle, for having me on.
So I want to have you walk us through what you think drove the strong import and export data for August.
Yes, I mean, the numbers were astonishing. They defied comprehension and they defied all expectations. It also seems that China is continuing to power forward as the global economy starts to reset itself and gain a certain amount of normalcy. And so what we're seeing across the board with China's major trade partners, both Europe, the ASEAN member nations, as well as the United States, we see all significant increases in terms of the demand for exported products from China. What we did as we go into the numbers saw that three broad categories were very strong, and they were clothing, furniture, as well as small appliances for homes and kitchens. And so this is somewhat COVID related in that people are spending more time at home and thus, wanting to upgrade their furniture or upgrade their kitchens. But the clothing aspect is simply because we're seeing in many major economies, many companies are requiring their workers to return to the office. And here in America, all major universities, as well as primary schools, the students have been called back to the schools, and now we have students back on campuses. And so in my own personal spending, I could see that I've had to upgrade my wardrobe as I've gotten used to wearing athletic clothing for the better part of the last year and a half. And so those are the drivers of what's driving a lot of the exports out of China. And in terms of what we're seeing for the very important second half of the year, which is Q3 and Q4, which leads us up to the very important Christmas buying season, we're seeing a lot of retailers and manufacturers move up and advance their orders from their Chinese factories to make sure that they can get around those previously mentioned logistics bottlenecks to ensure that these stores and retailers will have product to sell just in time for the all-important Christmas season.
Right. Because we know that those COVID flare-ups due to the Delta variant did have some people wondering about what that would mean for the holiday season. I want to shift gears now and talk about inflation data, which is going to be coming out. What are the expectations there?
Well, the producer price index is also already giving us some indication within China that China's manufacturers are already signaling across the board increases for their primary inputs and raw materials. And so we're seeing this across the board in all major economies. And there is a degree of, producer price inflation and supply inflation that is now affecting, the entire world.
So then what sort of monetary and fiscal measures might we expect in the coming months to really continue to support the economy?
Well, what we can see is this. I mean, as the economies start to heat up, in the United States at least, there's already discussion of monetary tightening. In other words, increasing the interest rates. And in China, the jury is still out in terms of, although policymakers in China are very pleased with these export trade figures, they're also seeing a reduction in consumer or regular consumption amongst Chinese citizens, which has policymakers a little bit worried, as well as the spike in inflation in terms of, the input prices. And this will, that we've heard already, that China's policymakers and the Central Bank of China is considering greater fiscal as well as monetary stimulus.
And I obviously want to talk about the US-China trade relationship. You have the two biggest economies in the world. What is your outlook for US-China trade relations?
Well, technically, we still are embroiled in a trade war, and there have been no meaningful discussions amongst the key players and policymakers on both the Biden administration as well as President Xi Jinping's side. We can continue to see, many more months of this to come. But in my opinion, if you look at these export trade figures, this seems to be a trade war on paper only, because the market is responding. And what the market is signaling is that, yeah, trade war or not, we are continuing to book orders with our Chinese factories and continuing to order product from our Chinese factories. And so it's the market, and the market seems to have a different response altogether to what official policy, seems to be with regard to this trade war.